have a tortilla up here with me. I don't really know what to do with this. No, I'm just gonna warm it up for you. I'm pressing it, and then I'll give it to you. All right. So, what's up, guys? For those of you that I haven't had a chance to meet, my name is Daniel. I'm one of the leaders here at JVox, and so Josh let me know that he was going to be out of town, and so he asked me, "Hey, man, could you sub in and share a word?" I was like, "Sure. What do you want me to talk about today?" He's like, "I want you to talk to middle schoolers about generosity," and I was like, "What?" Because every time I've heard a message about generosity, the majority of the time it's regarding finances. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know, who here has a job? Like, I was like, does anyone here actually, oh, okay, you guys are way ahead than I am, so that's pretty good. Okay, and we'll definitely touch on finances too. But when I started thinking about, okay, in middle school, when I was in middle school, when I thought about generosity, this was a stage in my life where really, honestly, everything was being given to me. Not really a time where I had much to offer, or I felt like I didn't have much to offer. And so today, I want us all to reflect and think like, man, I do have things to offer. I can be generous with things that maybe I don't have a lot of money, but I have other things that I can offer people. But the whole point of today is I want us to really zero in on and learn about the important attitude that allows us to be a generous person. You see, what we're going to study today is we're going to see that there are different attitudes when it comes to being generous. And so I want us to be able to identify what different types of generosity levels are there, and which one am I? And so with that, I want us to jump into the key verse found in 2 Corinthians. And so we're going to pop it up on the screen for you guys in a second. And this is Jesus talking about being a cheerful giver. And it starts in 2 Corinthians chapter 9, verse 6. And it should be up there. There it is. And this is Jesus saying, the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will also reap bountifully. So let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. So get this. When you're hearing about this, when you're reading this, to me, when I was reading this, two things stuck out to me. There are two types of people that can be generous: those who give sparingly and those who give bountifully. So, like, what is bountifully? Like, when I heard bounty, I thought of, like, the paper towel of, like, the guy Bounty. Like, that's what I thought of. Like, what does giving bountifully mean, right? So I'm just curious here. I'm just going to pick brains here. What does it mean to give sparingly? What does it mean to give sparingly? Yeah? Okay. Anyone else? Okay, so for me, sparingly means someone that's giving, but they're more focused. Their motive really isn't so much on giving. What they're really focused on is what they're able to keep. You see, so I'm giving to you, but in reality, like, I'm not too excited about it. Like, I'll give you this, but like, all right, how much did I have after I gave? My motive in giving isn't actually giving to someone. It's what was I left with after I gave. It's someone that's trying to, like, give as little as possible. I mean, I'll give, but like, man, as little as possible. Whereas a cheerful giver, a giver that gives bountifully, is someone that gives without reservation. It's someone that gives everything they have, and they do it cheerfully. They say, hey, it doesn't matter what it costs me to give, I'm going to give it all to you. I have a couple of examples for you guys, because if you're like me, I like examples. A sparing giver in the Bible, I thought of Cain. Now, you guys are probably familiar with the story of Abel and Cain. And so in the story, we see that Cain offers a sacrifice to the Lord, but he gives him, some versions say he just decided to give some of his crops and some vegetables to the Lord. In other words, he wasn't really focused on giving the Lord his best. Just, I need to do this, so like, I'll just give it to him. Whereas his brother Abel, he gave in abundance. He gave bountifully. He gave the best of what he had. Another example that I think of is found in Mark, and we can put that passage up. And it's an example of when people were about to give their taxes over to Caesar, and we see that, and he sat down opposite the treasury and watched the people, he being Jesus. So Jesus is watching people put money into an offering box, and many rich people put in large sums, and then a poor widow comes. So a bunch of rich people come, they give a lot of their stuff, but then a poor widow came and put in 2 small copper coins. We can agree she gave much less than these guys. So those 2 coppers, they made a penny. And he called his disciples to him and said to them, so this is Jesus. He observes this. He sees a lot of rich people gave a lot, but then he sees this widow give just 2 coppers, which is like a penny. And this is what he said to them. We can go to the next slide, please. Truly I say to you, this poor widow has put in more than all those who are contributing to the offering box. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she out of her poverty has put everything she had, all she had to live on. So right here we see this example. There's people that had a lot, and they gave a lot. But what really stuck out to Jesus is like, man, this lady, she gave everything. Like, she didn't count the cost. When she was giving, she gave bountifully. She had everything that she had. She gave it to the Lord. And so I'm not saying like once you give your money, you give everything. But I am saying this. We're called to be living sacrifices, my friends. What we have to give is our life. We're called to give and be generous with the life that we have been given. And so we're not here to live a life that's sparing. We're not here to like hold back and say, in some areas I'm going to give to the Lord, but in all areas I'm going to just like satisfy myself. No. We have to give everything to the Lord. We have a lot of things to offer him, not just our money. We have gifts. We have our own time, which we're going to go into later. But before we jump into that, I want us to jump into a time of tag and go through some questions because I want us to be able to truly identify and make sure that we understand what it is that we're talking about when we say a sparing giver or a giver that gives in plenty or cheerfully. So let's jump into tag and go through these questions. All right. So we able to identify, we know people that are generous. We also know people that might not be as generous, or they'll give, but they don't give as cheerfully as others. Now, here's what I want us to identify. Today, I'm not talking about people that don't want to give. Today, I'm talking about there are people that do give. Both of these people give. Both of these categories, both of these people are giving, but what is their attitude? Because I think majority of people here are willing to give, but what is our attitude when we give? My concern isn't that one of you guys is going to be like, no, I don't want to give. We know you guys, and so I genuinely think that everyone here is going to be willing to give. My concern is, what is the attitude that we have when the opportunity comes up to give? The last question that we had in Tag Group, and I'm not sure if you guys got to it, but the last question was, which is better, to give generously or bountifully, or someone who gives sparingly? And I think everybody here would agree with me that it is better to give bountifully. In other words, it's better to be a generous person. I don't know about you guys, but if I'm on the receiving end, I would much rather prefer someone who is happy to be giving me something as opposed to someone that's not that happy about it, right? And so let's jump back to, not there yet. Let's jump back to the first verse, please, in 2 Corinthians, where it said, the point is this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly. So here's something that I want us to see. Look, when I was reading this, there is a characteristic that we see with each of these two givers. Someone who gives sparingly, what's the characteristic? It's that they're giving grudgingly or out of necessity. What does that mean? It just simply means that, like, yeah, sure, I'll give it to you, but, like, I'm really not happy about this. Or I'll give it to you, but, like, I'm giving it to you because I have to. Like, my parents told me that I have to do this. Or, like, man, like, I'll feel bad, so, like, I'm going to give it to you, right? So that's the attitude of someone that gives sparingly. Whereas someone who gives bountifully is a cheerful giver. So we've identified, hey, it's a lot better to be generous. It's a lot better to give bountifully. It's better to be on the receiving end. So what separates someone who gives sparingly to someone who gives generously? And Luke, that was a slide that you just had up of what is the difference between the two types of givers. You see, someone who has a heart that gives sparingly sees God as a taker, as opposed to someone that has a heart that gives bountifully, a generous heart. They see God as a giver, as a provider. One of my favorite verses, this is one of my life verses. Throughout my whole life, I just always thought this. I always think of it. It's a verse that says, everything that is good comes from above. In other words, everything that is good comes from the Lord. Man, I'll be driving in a parking lot, and if I see an open spot, I'm like, praise God. Like, that's a good thing. Like, so I just drive in there, right? Like, I just identify everything. I'm like, man, this comes from the Lord. And that gives me a position of just being so much more grateful of what is mine. Because look at this. Check this out. If I see God as a taker, right? So if I see him as someone that's always trying to take from me, man, I'm not going to want to give. As opposed to, man, if I see that God is the one that's giving me all of this, well, man, my attitude's going to be a lot different. I don't know about you guys. I'm a little curious. So I'm going to ask everyone to raise their hand here. Does anyone here have a friend at school that shows up without a book bag? Like, they just come, like, without anything, like no pencils, no markers, nothing. They just show up. And if that's you, don't raise your hand. I had a friend like this. His name was Sean. And here's the thing. It's not that Sean couldn't afford any of these things. Sean had a very nice house. Sean would come to school every day. And we'd be in class, and he'd be like, hey, Daniel, can I have a piece of paper? I'd be like, what the heck, dude? Like, I've given you so much. And he's like, hey, man, can I have a pencil? I'm like, where are your parents, Sean? Like, why don't you have any of this stuff? And Sean would just always be asking and asking and asking. And he became, like, the group moocher, right? He would just mooch off of us. We're like, dude, like, bring your own stuff. And I wasn't willing to give things to him because it would annoy me so much that he just would come and take and take and take and take. If we have that view towards the Lord, that every time, oh man, I have to do this. I have to pray for somebody. Oh, I have to be generous to someone. Oh, I have to do this. Like, the Lord requires so much of me. He's taking and taking and taking. We're not going to be willing. We might give it. We might do it. Like, yeah, I'll pray for you. Like, Lord bless. But I'll do it sparingly. I'll do it grudgingly. I'll do it in a way that's just like, I have to do this. As opposed to, if I identify everything that I have comes from the Lord, man, it doesn't matter because it's not mine to begin with. In the same verse in Corinthians, we can jump to the next slide. We see something that I thought was really cool. In the same verse that we're learning about giving, in the same verse that we're talking about someone that gives sparingly and someone that gives bountifully, the next verse it says, and God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. What is this saying? God is the provider. This is a reminder that God, they're saying, hey, be a giver, be cheerfully, don't give sparingly. But hey, check this out. God abounds in everything. Everything you'll have to do, he's going to give you. He's going to provide for you. So here's the thing, it's not from us. The money that we receive, it's not ours. The gifts that we have, I know we have a J-Vox band up here, people that know how to sing, that can sing well. I know how to sing, I can't sing well. Like, I don't have that gift, right? We have different gifts. There are people that are gifted with prayer. Man, all of those things come from the Lord. They are not ours to decide, yeah, I'm not feeling like it, I'll do it some other time. No, we have to give generously because it does not come from us. It comes from the Lord. So check this out. We've identified two different types of givers, the one that gives sparingly and the one that gives generously. We identified that, okay, well, Daniel, I want to be a generous giver, so what's the difference between the two? Well, we know that the generous person views God as a provider, and the more selfish person views God as a taker. Okay, so we were here, now we're here. Now what's the next step? Daniel, how do I view God as a provider? Like, how can I become a bountiful or a generous person? The difference to me between someone that views God as a taker and someone that views God as a provider is the relationship that they share with the Lord. Listen, if you are in a relationship with the Lord, if you're pursuing Him, if you're daily saying, Lord, my life is yours, everything I have is yours, it's so much easier to identify and say, like, wait, none of what I have is mine. Everything comes from the Lord. Here's the other thing, though. While I was preparing this message, I was thinking, well, there are people that don't believe in God that are also generous. There are generous people that don't believe in the Lord. And so some people here might be thinking, like, well, I can still be generous, and I don't have to have that, like, deep of a relationship with the Lord. And I'm not going to lie to you. Yeah, there are a lot of wealthy people that are very generous. But here's what I have to say to that. What is the value of what the other person is giving? The value that a Christ follower, when they spend more time with someone than someone that isn't, man, you're able to be a reflection of the Lord. What is the value of the time that you're giving, of the gift that you're giving? Someone else, sure, they might be generous. Sure, they might have money. And money might be the last thing that they have to offer, though, because they wouldn't be able to offer a message of hope. You guys do. It doesn't matter that you guys aren't going to be the richest person in the world 20 years from now. You have the richest message that could be given. Be generous with it. Be generous with how you speak. Be generous with how you live. It is not your life. It is the Lord's. What is the value? And so what this all boils down to is this. What relationship do you have with the Lord? That is going to determine what type of a giver you're going to be. If you have a deep relationship with the Lord, then you're going to be able to identify that He's a provider. If you're able to identify that He's a provider, you'll be able to give generously. Here's an illustration. I think of this cup as someone that they might be generous and sure, I'll spend time with you and I'll do all of this, but if they're not filled with the Lord, like what they have to offer, there's nothing in here. Like they can't fill the other person up with what truly matters, which is the Lord. Man, you can give of your time, and if you're being a representation of Christ, that is the best thing you could do. When you speak to someone, when you pray for someone, that is what you guys can offer to someone. Be generous with it. This cup, this is someone that follows the Lord, that is filled with the Lord. And when they pour into this other person, they're not pouring out of an empty place. They can fill up the other person. The important thing here is we need to be filled up before we decide to go out and be generous. Because if not, we're just going to be, sure, we'll be giving of our time, we'll be doing all of this, but if the Lord's not in it, my friends, it's really all done in vain. So pursue the Lord. Be filled up with Him so that when you pour out and when you do become a generous and give bountifully, when you do that, man, there's going to be so much value in what you do, and there's going to be such a difference, and you're going to be a walking testimony toward the Lord. So friends, view the Lord as a provider, not as a taker. Be generous. Give cheerfully, not grudgingly or out of necessity. But the only way to be able to do that is if we're truly pursuing and following the Lord, running after Him. If we do that, then it's just going to come out of second nature. Friends, I know some of us don't have a lot of money, but here's the thing, here's the kicker. Not all of us here are going to be the richest person. But man, like I said earlier, we have something that nothing else on this world can compare in value, which is a relationship with the Lord. And man, give of that generously and cheerfully. So that's my encouragement to you guys today, to be generous people, to be filled up with the Lord, to view Him as a provider. Nothing that what we have is ours to hold on to, but to give generously to the Lord. And I hope that even later on down, like in 20 years from now, you're reminded of this and think, man, none of this, my time, like my family, none of this is for me. Everything I have, let everything I do glorify the Lord.